Count Corla, and I think for those of us who are members of the committee, we're at a kind of a peculiar juncture where we've been through months of discussion on this issue, but yet I certainly, and I'm sure my colleagues are acutely aware that probably for many of the general public this is the start of the run-in to the referendum campaign, an issue which some people have waited a lifetime for, to be honest. But I heard some people talk about being surprised at the way the Citizens' Assembly approached this matter, surprised at their outcome, surprised at the outcome of the committee and its deliberations on that. And what I'd say to those people is, if you were surprised about that, it really means you haven't been listening over the past number of years, because it's very clear to me that attitudes in Ireland have changed dramatically over the past period, from even the days when I came into this House, when myself and Deputy Wallins and Deputy Collins first raised these issues here. It's completely different. But when we first raised them a number of years ago, it actually coincided with what was an awakening outside of the House. That was the first time those 4 women went on the Late Late Show and talked about coming home from England, having had a termination for an abortion because of fatal fetal abnormalities. It was the first time that people began to come out into the open, to say their name and to tell their story, and to, if you like, shed the stigma that has surrounded Ireland's abortion reality. This is not a debate about whether we have abortion in Ireland or not. We have abortion. We have a constitutional right to abortion as Irish citizens, but shamefully that constitutional right has to take place outside of these shores, a constitutional right to travel out of our homes for a medical procedure, a constitutional right to get information on it, but we can't have that treatment at home. And I think in that sense, most people have woken up and realised that they know loads of people who've had abortions. They might not know that they know, or the person mightn't have told you, but you can be guaranteed that everybody knows loads of women who've had abortions. Your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your friends, your wives. It's a normal part of reproductive life in any society. And I'm sorry I'm getting emotional here. I don't know why particularly that is, but I suppose we've come a long way on this. So I want to thank Senator Noon and the committee secretariat. I think the staff of the Oireachtas who supported the work of the committee were outstanding in their deliberations, and I think the other deputies have made points about the experts who came in, the people who gave of their time, and it was their expertise. And I really take offence, to be honest, at the way some of those people were castigated over the past period, decried as advocates. These are people who are experts in their field. They're experts in medicine, experts in the law, experts in human rights, or they're compassionate human beings. And they were there to talk to us about life and to talk about Ireland and pointing a way forward. And the reason why the committee and the Citizens' Assembly came out with the outcome that it did is because we listened and we heard. We heard really strong factual, medical, legal and human rights evidence. We heard from people about the damage that the 8th Amendment has done in terms of impacting negatively on our care of pregnant women. We heard from Professor Arul Kumarang, who confirmed the direct role of the 8th Amendment in the tragic death of Savita Halappanavar. We heard from our medical profession in the hospitals and our GP clinics about the fear of prosecution and the impact that has on the clinical and professional judgment of our doctors and those staff in our hospitals on a daily basis. We heard about the chill effect of the criminalisation of abortion and the 8th Amendment. And we heard very clearly that it's only in this area of women's health care that such interference exists between the right of a doctor to treat his patient appropriately. We also heard, obviously, from the human rights experts about how Ireland is an outlier and in breach again of the fundamental rights of our female citizens. And the case of Amanda Mellett and others does stand out, where we should remind ourselves that this state has been found guilty in recent years of discrimination and cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment, which aggravated the shame and stigma associated with criminalisation. And it was because we listened to expert opinion. And I defy anybody who slagged off the work of that committee, who generalised its arguments behind sloganeering and cheap, I suppose, headlines, to sit through and listen to the deliberations of that committee, and indeed the Citizens' Assembly, to hear the evidence and the way in which it was conducted. And I would defy you, having done that, to come back and cast any aspersions about the functioning of that committee. So my only thing really would be, is, having heard all the evidence, why the committee didn't go further, to be perfectly honest, because we are an outlier in terms of this issue, in terms of our equivalent societies in the rest of Europe or modern advanced countries or so on. Ireland stands out as being completely different in terms of its healthcare for women than all of those other countries. So, I mean, that said, I'm delighted that the committee was clear on the main recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly, and we were very clear that we need to remove the 8th Amendment from the Constitution. We need to decriminalise abortion, and we need to place this aspect of women's health care in a medical setting where it belongs. I think that's very important. I'd really like to say, I'd forgotten to say it earlier, but I welcome the speech from Minister Harris. I'd like to compliment him on that. I very much support his comments that it is unacceptable that women cannot access medical help in Ireland, and that we can't any longer turn our backs on that. Fair play. And I echo the points made by other deputies that I hope when we say that, what we mean is a referendum in May, because there's an expectation there now that that will be delivered. There's a most definite expectation among our young people and our students who in the main leave these shores to go and work abroad in the summers, that this will be held at a time where they can participate, because it is their call. We're past it, thankfully, but it's for the young people, and we never had a vote on it in the first place. So I think we need to stick to the deadline that was there. We need to deliver a May referendum, and we need to be mindful of the participation of young people in that situation. I mean, it was funny, it struck me when I heard of the death of Peter Sutherland more than a week ago. In some ways, there was a little irony in the fact that, let's remember, Peter Sutherland was the Attorney-General who advised the government not to put this in the Constitution. And there have been many points made eulogising his legacy, but that's one that I haven't really heard mentioned anywhere. But the reality is it's probably the only thing I'd agree with him on, but that's a separate argument for today. But I tell you, I definitely agreed with him on that one, and he was right. We have had and caused enormous problems. It's been a disaster, a scourge on women. But not only that, it's been an absolute joke, because that referendum was sold on the basis that it would mean there would be no Irish abortion. 170,000 Irish women have had to leave these shores for abortion. So if you like, on the grounds of abject failure alone, the 8th Amendment should go, because it hasn't stopped Irish abortion. It's just meant that Irish abortions are more expensive, they take place later, they take place more often surgically than medically, and they put many of our women through huge trauma in having to travel for medical care. And unfortunately, it also means that some of our women who can't travel, vulnerable women, poor women, women who are too young, women who are too sick, who can't travel, that is the cost. So the idea of standing over that continued hypocrisy is just not on. I think we need to send a strong signal. I think the tone of the discussion in here has been broadly very good. I think the tone at the committee was largely very good. Not always, but largely. But I think the media need to take note as well. There are elements in our media who, maybe to deal with flagging newspaper sales or whatever, I don't know, are trying to go back to 1983 and stir up a sort of a them and us, zealots on all sides type of debate around this issue. Irish Times even had that nonsense last week. I don't accept that that is the case. This is actually not a divisive issue. This is a very personal issue for a lot of our citizens. And there are no sides. There are no rights and wrong. There are human beings who are making private and personal decisions about their lives that are going on today, tomorrow, and when we deal with this. And the job of a state is to support those decisions. That's all that we can do in any of these. So I think some of the media have been very irresponsible, and I'd like them to think about that. Because what we'd like to have, and what I'd like to see happen, is the benefits of that expert legal and medical opinion that we got on the committee, that the Citizens' Assembly got in its deliberations. I'd like the Irish public to have access to that in a reasoned, mature manner, and not have the red herring arguments that have come in. The appalling use of people with disabilities, of talk about the elimination of people with Down syndrome, or some terrible stuff like this, when we know that the majority of abortions that take place in the very early weeks of pregnancy, up to 9 weeks, where in the main Down syndrome isn't detected until after 12 weeks. So you're entering very wrong arguments in order to distort and manipulate in an emotive, non-evidence-based way, and I think it's completely wrong. And I think one of the very interesting statements around the issue and the debate over the past period was the position of Catholics for Choice, which was published this week. And I think they made a very good statement that I'd like to put on the record. And they say many of the hierarchy's teachings on reproductive rights have not been received by the faithful. For instance, the majority of Catholic women have made conscience-based decisions to use contraception responsibly, and Catholic women have abortion at the same rate as other women. They understand that these can be ethical choices. Armed with the knowledge that conscience is not about imposing beliefs that are out of sync with people's lives, but that it is about allowing the faithful to formulate their own moral positions, Irish Catholics have evolved into thinking about abortion. They can reconcile the complexities of these weighty matters. They know that you can be a woman who believes that she would not have an abortion in any circumstances, but yet support other women and the right of other women to do so. Or you can have had an abortion and do not want other women to face the restrictions you faced. Or you can be a man and respect the right of every woman to make her own decision and be the author of her own life. And I think that's pretty powerful testimony, because I've never met an abortion advocate, or I've never met anybody who's pro-abortion. Never. In the same way as I'm not pro-hip replacement. I don't think that every person should go and get their hip replaced. But I do recognise that it's necessary if they need that medical health care provision, and I stand over their right to have it. It's exactly the same thing. It's about respecting people's choices in the first place. It's not about killing unborn babies. That is an utter nonsense. This issue starts with women faced with crisis pregnancies. And a crisis pregnancy, in some instances, is very much a planned and wanted pregnancy, where something tragic happens along the way. Something happens to the fetus so that it is no longer compatible with life. Something happens to the woman where her life or her health is going to be impaired, and in consultation with her doctor or her partner, she decides that the best thing for her health and well-being is to terminate that pregnancy. Other crisis pregnancies are not planned. They happen because somebody is raped and violated. And are we seriously suggesting that if a pregnancy follows that rape, that person is supposed to be shackled to that? That her husband, her partner, her other children have to endure a pregnancy and all of that because of that? It's absolutely abhorrent to most people that that would actually happen. And all of the other pledgers, the young student who gets pregnant in college, who was about to start a new career, the woman who's just got her children back from being in care, who's come off drugs and can't deal maybe with another child, the person who's homeless, who has no roof over their head, the older woman who's raised her children, who for the first time in her life is getting her own life back and unexpectedly finds herself pregnant. Who are these? These are Irish women. They're the same as women in all other countries. They look up and they weigh up their life's decisions and they make what's the best decision for them. And they should do it in conjunction and support. You know, we've heard some really mad issues in the committee. Like even last night, the issue of adoption was introduced. Deputy Healy-Rae mentioned a constituent of his who asked him to read out a text to beg that we wouldn't have abortion in Ireland because he was adopted and he had a great life as a person who was adopted. Now, what is that about? You know, there are very few children put up for adoption in Ireland now, when we supposedly don't have adoption in Ireland now. So how in God's name could a change to the repeal of the 8th Amendment do anything about that? It couldn't. The only reason why there aren't, if you want to do something about adoption and boost the numbers of children for adoption, actually what you'd have to do is reduce the payments to lone parents. And force people into a position where they can't afford to raise their own children, because that's had the biggest impact on reducing the adoption figures. It's not abortion, it's because people can raise children and have the more means to do so. And I support the call of the Archbishop of Dublin, who said that we should be supporting the payments to people and single parents and so on, in case if that was a reason why somebody wouldn't have the economic means. And there are people to raise their child in dignity on their own. All people should have the right to do this. So when people say they're arguing in favour of an end to they're not advocating abortion. It's not up to me to tell anybody else what to do, and I never would. It's about supporting the decisions that people have. And I had a very moving, I suppose, letter from, I'm sure many deputies did as well, from a parent of a child which was diagnosed with a fatal fetal abnormality and lived a short time, and the pleasure that that child gave that family. And I fully support and accept their narrative, and I'm very glad for the brief period of joy that that child gave that family, and I would that it would be otherwise. But that's not going to change if we repeal the 8th Amendment. Those people can still continue with the pregnancy and to have those brief moments of joy. But you've got to understand the position from the other people who can't deal with that for a whole plethora of other reasons, and equally respect their position. That's all that has to be done here, because it's not to say that people who support women's rights and the right to an abortion, all we're saying is that a woman knows best about her body, her life circumstances, and in conjunction with her doctor and her family is the best place to know what's best for her, when is the best time to have a child, and to be supported in that decision making. And that's all that a responsible society can do. I've heard so much stuff like, oh, you do this, the floodgates will open. It's a nonsense. Irish people have abortion all the time. It's not going to have any impact on that. In actual fact, and I think everybody would be supportive of reducing abortion. It would be absolutely great. And we know, and the evidence given to the committee shows us how we can do it. We can do it by reducing crisis pregnancies. We can do it by investing properly in a free, comprehensive contraception programme, in proper sex education in schools, and absolutely in increasing the payments to lone parents, in increasing the payments to parents of children with disabilities and so on, so that people can choose to have children and have the right to raise those children in respect and in dignity. And I think that's all a society can do. And you know, I think we are in a different place. The Taoiseach made the point in apologising to Joanne Hayes that we're in a different place than we were in the 1980s. But actually it's the same place. It took 34 years to apologise. reproductive choices are something of shame and stigma, not to be talked about, to be hidden away, to a society that's open and tolerant and appreciative of all the different aspects of people's lives. So I compliment everybody who's been involved in this process so far. I really urge the government to hear what the committee said, and in particular our call that it has to be repeal simpliciter, that it has to be access to a minimum without restriction as to reason up to 12 weeks. That's based on our proper finding, and it has to be a referendum in May so that we can bring this country into a completely different place and do justice by our young people.